Welcome to the second day of TestMu 2023. Thank you for joining us today. Hope you all are having a really good time. I'm Kavya and I'll be your host for the day. Before we start the session, a quick shout out to our 40 plus partners for supporting us. Do drop by the virtual expo to check out their contest and learn about the cool technologies as well as their platforms. So let's dive into today's session. Our speaker, Elizabeth Zagroba, is a quality lead at Mendix. She's an exploratory tester with an extraordinary power of observation and categorization. She's currently serving as co-organizer for the Friends of Good Software conference and is a program committee member for Agile Testing Days. And today, she'll talk on my crafting project became critical infrastructure. Driven to the madness by the normal workflow for testing her application, Elizabeth wrote a small Python script in a couple of days, and she will take us on a journey of a simple Python script turned into a game changer for her team. She'll also share how it evolved from solving her own problem to becoming a vital part of the release process. As part of the session, she will throw light on how good collaboration takes time and energy and how small things for one use can grow into things with many uses. So, Elizabeth, welcome to the session. Really great to have you over here, and I hope you are having a good day.
Thank you. It's good to be here. I am having a good day. Yes, it's wild to hear the words that I wrote weeks or months ago be read to me, back to me aloud. So I hope you enjoyed them so far. Let me share my screen and then I will share the slides. That's the correct order. And then I will start giving this presentation to you. Let's see, here we go. The screen. Okay, hopefully you can see my slides now. Yes, my crafting project did become critical infrastructure. This is an experience report. So I'm going to tell you about this repository, this Python script that I've been working on for a few years now, off and on. You'll hear a bit about that. And it might be that you learned something during this session. It's possible that your deeper learning could come from connecting my experience to yours rather than any particular thing that I'll be saying, because this will just be the story of something I've been working on for a bit. I'll also be telling you a bit about the company that I work for as part of the exposition, the beginning of the story. That is not to tell you, this is not a sales pitch. I won't be mentioning the company name. It's just to give you some context for why this whole project was needed. And how it came to be. So let's get started. I work for an IT company. This is our headquarters in Rotterdam in the Netherlands. That's where I live, although I'm American. We have, because we're an IT company, one of the bigger departments that we have is our research and development department. We've got a few hundred people, developers, testers, UX designers, product managers, working on the technology that we sell to our customers. The two biggest products that we sell are a cloud solution and an interactive development environment, an IDE. The IDE that we build is a low-code platform. It's not super important to know what that means beyond the fact that it's something that when you look at it, it's not lines of code and syntax highlighting like you usually think of an IDE, like Visual Studio Code or PyCharm, but it's more boxes and arrows and forms that you're filling out. It's a particular different skill set, I would say, than writing in what we call sort of high code environments. The important thing about this IDE that we develop in, well, I guess there are a couple of things. One is that some of the products that we build in R&D are built using the IDE. We're dog fooding or drinking our own champagne. We're using our own tool to build some of our applications that we then sell to customers. So that's one thing. The other thing you need to know about this IDE is that it is currently a Windows desktop software only. And so most developers, or even testers, when they join the company and they are working on a project that uses our IDE, they choose a Windows machine for themselves because they realize that that is the best development environment experience. I made a crucial mistake when joining the company and moving to the Netherlands and choosing a Mac laptop for myself. And so I ended up on a team that indeed was building applications using the IDE that we build as a company. This particular story starts in 2019. So I was on a team building what we called the Data Hub catalog application. And the way that I would be testing this for my team, I was the tester on the team at the time, was that I would I would want to run our application locally on my machine to either be running automated tests against the application or to be running, to be exploring it a bit and running some manual tests. The way I would do that is I would open Parallels where my Windows VM was, and then I would open the IDE and run the application there. Unfortunately, at some point in time in 2019, my machine decided to not let me do this anymore. And when I tried to run the application locally, first my Windows VM would crash, then Parallels would crash, then my whole Mac would crash. I just could not run the IDE to be able to test our application locally, which was a pretty, not a complete blocker for doing my job, it turned out, but a pretty big impediment. But luckily, as you may recall, we also have a hosted cloud solution. And so we did have a test environment where I could build and deploy a package and go look at it there. I didn't have to be running the application locally. So we had, for our cloud solution, we have publicly documented build and deploy APIs where you can go through in our cloud UI in a web application and click some buttons to create a package. I would normally be taking the latest revision from one of my developers, one of their branches, to be able to see what changes they made that day or in the past few days. Then I would transport that package usually to the test environment, restart the environment, and at that point, I would be able to do the same thing that I wanted to, run automated tests or do some exploratory testing myself. The reality of using this cloud UI is that each of these steps, you had to wait and watch a loading spinner on the page. And so if you were really diligent and focused, you could sit there and watch for the moment that the loading spinner was done, and then immediately click the next button and do the same thing. And if you did that, it would take about 8 minutes to deploy our particular application that was a bit more complicated than customer applications at this point. It would take about 8 minutes to get that application onto our test environment. The reality is that I didn't spend my life watching a loading spinner. When the loading spinner would start, I would go read my email, check my Slack messages. Because this is 2019, I was able to check Twitter. And so I would forget that the thing was spinning and waiting. And I lost a lot of time just trying to switch to a different branch to test something for a different developer on my team. I was supporting a handful of developers at this point in time. And so what I wanted to do instead was call the APIs. My dream was to click one button to trigger one Python script and constantly be updated about what was happening, not just have some loading spinner telling me to wait, but not know why. And then I wanted the application to be ready to use. Just one step, something I wouldn't forget to do. It turns out after I actually wrote this script that running it took about 2 minutes when you weren't there constantly forgetting. And so I ended up writing this Python script in about a day and a half. I spent another half a day getting some feedback on it and doing some changes as a result. This Python script saved me so much time, though. I was probably switching branches 5 times a day. And when you take the optimally, perhaps even longer, 8 minutes that it took through the Cloud UI to deploy to the test environment versus the 2 minutes that this script took to run, I was saving about 30 minutes a day, about a half hour. I would say I was also saving a lot of my sanity as part of that process as well. Watching a loading spinner is no way to do your job. I was also really excited to write this Python script because oh yeah, there are a couple of other things I wanted to say, I realized. It wasn't that long a script. This is the end of the code here, so it had from lines 153 to 158, just 6 different methods that I was calling. It was 161 lines in total that did a lot of the same things that the UI did. Part of what took me a day and a half to figure out was that it needed slightly different steps, and the way that the API operated wasn't directly reflected in the UI. So figuring all of this out took a little bit of that time. But yeah, I was really excited to start a new Python repository. I hadn't started a new repository before. My main experience in writing code had been editing existing tests, fixing them when they failed, and adding new tests to a repo that already existed. But a lot of doing that is looking at patterns and ways that other people have already set things up, or copying and pasting and changing a few lines to get a new test running. I wanted, in starting a new repository, to be able to write Python that other people could read, that made sense to other people, and I was curious about structuring the whole repository and what that would be like. And so I wanted someone to look at this code and say, Elizabeth, what are you doing here? The Python convention is to declare variables in all caps and not using underscores and lowercase. Right. If you group all of these things into a class, that's actually the way most people would write it into better Python. And so those first couple of crafting days, maybe I should explain that too. We have crafting days at the company that I worked for. We get 2 days per month to work on things that are not specifically in the product roadmap for the team that we're working on. They are supposed to be used for some kind of building of your skills or technology related thing. And so I at least had time to write this script without having to deal with justifying it to my product owner, or putting it on the Jira board, or having some of that pressure when I just got started with it. The thing that I had to start just did the one thing that I really needed it to do, which was deploying our Data Hub catalog application, that one app, to our one test environment. I didn't have to deal with other people's projects or applications. I didn't have much or any in this method error handling. The code has improved a bit. This is closer to what it looks like today. And it really, it saved me a half hour a day. enabled me to do my job without going insane, watching a loading spinner. And so after maybe a month or two, so just a few days working on it in total during my crafting days, I shared this script with my developers and said, I have this great script. You can run it from your terminal on your machine, your command line. It deploys your application so quickly to whichever hosted cloud environment you want. It's much better than the UI. Here you go. Here's read access so that you can use it yourself. And my developers all said, thank you, Elizabeth. We don't actually care about this script because we do not use the test environment. That's your job, is to look at the code and have it build the package, have it be deployed somewhere, and see how that all goes. We also have Windows machines ourselves, so we don't have the problem that you have where your machine crashes, which is why you needed this in the first place. And I said, okay, no problem. You don't have to use it. I will keep using it myself on my own machine. Doesn't matter to me. And it was like that, I think, probably for a couple of more months, that it was just something that enabled my workflow and really sped up what I could do for the team. Then, let's see, it was about the fall of 2020, come back to that date in a bit, that our corporate overlords, the company that owns the company that I work for, wanted us to run some security scans against our code. We knew that there would be a deadline for this sometime in 2021 coming up, but we didn't know exactly when it was. They wanted us to be able to scan our package of code against Snyk and Barracode. These both check for vulnerabilities in third-party libraries that we're using. And so one of my developers started a new repository, a GitLab. He built a GitLab pipeline to be able to run these scans against our code. He was using the same build package call that I had as part of my Python script, and realized, hey, in addition to building that package and having these scans run, I could also do that thing that Elizabeth is always asking us to do, which is run the tests against our code. I could just copy and paste her whole script so that the tests run, and then we know whether the tests pass without having to run them on our machines ourselves, which is a whole nother talk. But anyway, it turns out that we ended up on my team with a pipeline that did a couple of things that were really valuable. It ran the tests and it ran the security scans. And we were not the only team in the company that had those two things and wanted to get those both done. There were a bunch of other teams in other departments who were also using the IDE that my company builds to build apps that we sell to customers. And they also wanted to have their tests run and have these security scans run. And someone in this other unit was saying, oh, we should build a whole app. We should build another app to be able to set up these scans and build a pipeline. And it turns out that the person who had reviewed my Python script initially and looked at my original code was in that meeting and said, we don't need a whole runtime and a database and a whole other web application to be able to do this. Elizabeth actually solved this in 161 lines of Python code. Why don't you just use that for all these apps? And so I have footage not found here because that apparently is what happened. I wasn't privy to some of those conversations. I wasn't involved in those meetings. But what ended up happening is that more and more teams would Slack me a request for access to the repository so that they could, or to be able to either look at our pipeline or specifically for this Python script to be able to use it themselves. And so as part of that, people would have things that they wanted changed or new features that they wanted added, right? I had implemented a few different things that the script could do, but my main focus when I wrote it originally was just deploying my one application to my one test environment. You don't need to be able to read the text on this slide, but it's a list that I kept in GitLab along with the repository. So again, it was outside of the Jira board that we were using for my team and where we were managing most of our work, because I wanted this to just be my little side project. So I had a list for myself of all of the things that I wanted to do and add in the future. And then as I shared the repository, I would let people know that if they had changes that they wanted as well, that they could do the same thing. They could add an issue in the GitLab project, and I would make the changes. And then as they followed the issue, they could see when those got pushed to the main branch. The thing about running both security scans and tests is that then these pipelines that other teams were using and building became part of their release process. Something shifted, and it wasn't just enabling work or making work a little faster. It was suddenly a release blocking step for some of these teams. And so my little Python script suddenly became something that if it was broken, people became really impatient with me about. So although I wanted to continue my own side project and working on my Python script during my crafting days and being the only person who could edit this code, the reality was that other people wanted changes a little bit faster, and to not have to wait for months until I got to the bottom of this list to be able to make a change for them. So understandably, when one of these developers' pipelines was broken and prevented their release, they changed the way that some of the script worked. They asked for merge request access. They wanted to pass the arguments in a different way so that it was a little bit easier to set up as part of the pipeline. They made a big pile of changes, which apparently worked for them. I at least assumed that until I ran the script myself on my machine, and I realized that it no longer did the one thing that I needed it to do, which was deploy my catalog application to my test environment. So I reached out to them and said, hey, could you tell me a little bit more about where the script worked for you? I'm confused that it's breaking the changes that I had, and the thing that I needed. It turns out this developer was so impatient they hadn't actually run the code themselves. They understandably reacted by asking for tests on the repository, which, although I am a tester, I embarrassingly had never added, because to me, this was my side project. I was going to be the only one touching the code. I knew what was in there. And so I knew what to test or what didn't need testing anytime I was making a change. I didn't need a suite of automation. So ultimately, it took a few weeks to resolve with this impatient developer and get some of their changes merged in, and also the code that I needed working as well. But the result after that was that I didn't really have time or energy to maintain this repo anymore. Part of that is also because of when this was taking place. So along with the things that you probably are aware of that happened in the world in the years 2020 and 2021, I also became a manager for the first time in April of 2020. Such auspicious timing. And so suddenly I was managing a set of formerly my peers. Our team had split in half, and the developers that ended up on my team, two of them were fathers of young children who were suddenly at home all the time, distracting them from their work. My other teammate came from a country who was on the brink of civil war by this point in the middle of 2020 and couldn't travel back home at the time. Throughout 2021, I interviewed, hired, and then onboarded 7 different people, both to my team and the surrounding roles in my area of the organization, our product owner, the person who was briefly my boss. And so dealing with this Python script and what to do with these changes that this impatient developer had made, I really wasn't sure how to pick that back up. And every time I had crafting days, I was just catching up on the work that had piled up from the rest of the month. I didn't really have a chance to get back to it. And then I think it was, it must have been the end of 2021 that a combination of things changed. My role changed. I was no longer a manager. I got a different role where I was the title I have now, quality lead. I was serving, thinking about quality and testing for a few teams in our department. And I got another merge request from that same impatient developer. They came to me and said, Elizabeth, here's another big pile of changes that I want to be merged into the repo. Can you review this merge request for me? The thing that I've built is a UI for your Python script. And so I was really struggling at this point because there is a UI for deploying to our cloud. Our cloud teams maintain it. It's called the cloud UI. And although I talked about it a bit at the beginning, it's a little slow. It does exist. There's no need to reinvent the wheel, in my opinion. And I was, trying to get back to, why did I write this script? Is this something that I need to merge into the repo? And after consulting with a tester in another unit, I determined probably what I should have done from the beginning, which was to just let them fork the repository. Part of my dream in sharing this and as it grew to be part of people's pipelines was that everyone would help maintain and keep it up to date, and we would be learning from each other, right? It's so good to be able to not have to build things over and over again if you're all solving the same problem. But in this case, the answer was, I told this impatient developer, I'm so glad you built this UI. I'm glad that it works for you. Unfortunately, it doesn't belong as part of this repository. It serves a different purpose. You're welcome to use the code as you've written it, but I prefer that it stay in a fork. Why don't you keep it there rather than merging it back in? And so that, finally deciding that I needed to set a bit of a different boundary for this code base was part of what got me back to it. Also, by the summer of 2022, in my new role as quality lead, I had time. I had finally handed off the team that I had been the lead of for a bit, and I had a bit more freedom to be picking up, this list is titled plans, I'm noticing, picking up the things that I wanted, the changes that I wanted to make to this repository. The impatient developer had quit the company at this point, so I didn't feel like I needed to worry about what was happening with the code that they had spent so long getting to work and add to the repository. I took their advice and decided I wanted to write tests for the repo, because indeed, that was the thing that was going to make this, as it grew and grew, make it sustainable. And I decided that rather than getting requests at the last minute for a big pile of changes that I didn't understand the purpose of and wasn't great at reading. Reading other people's code is a skill into itself. Anyway, the thing that I wanted to do instead was to pair with people from the beginning to understand what the problem was so that we could go on an adventure together to solve that problem. Here's a tweet from June 1st of 2022 that says, I think I turned a conversation that started with, can you approve this code? I didn't read what was already there, added random stuff, and didn't try it out, into a collaborative effort towards something good. Can I be immature the rest of the week? I'm exhausted, sweat smile emoji. Yes, this is a thing that actually happened. But I did have the time and energy to start asking the right questions and start with, what changes did you want to make here? What was the goal that you were trying to accomplish? What code already exists in the repository and makes sense to reuse or not reuse? And we were able to come to a better understanding here. I spent some of the summer of 2022, and I think this split into the fall as well, getting through a bunch of the things that I wanted to add to the repository. I added all those tests for each of the different actions that the script could do. I've got just a couple of things left that I know that I want to do, and then it's probably time to start a new list. But the outcome here is that when the script fails, people come to me to fix it, and I'm back to being able to fix it right away. And when people have changes that they want to propose and new things that they want to add to get their pipeline working in a different way, I'm able to help them understand whether that's something that I should write or they should write or something that we should write together. The script was actually demoed to some customers recently, so it's possible that customers will be asking for or demanding it. I can't quite imagine that this will become part of one of the two big products that we sell, but I suppose that it's possible. The other thing that I heard that happened just a few weeks ago is that people are finally using the script to deploy to our production environment. We had issues with being able to store constants and scheduled events securely, and now that problem has been solved by someone else's crafting days, it turns out, this script is really pushing code live onto our servers. So the thing that I want to ask you about here at the end, we'll get to the questions and answers, and I haven't been reading your chat as you've been chatting away during this talk, but I'm curious to know what you have to say about this, is what would you have done differently in this situation? What dreams did I have that were the wrong ones, and where would you have chosen a different path? The path that I went on was that I wrote a Python script, I shared it with my team, I shared it with other teams. Crucially, I accepted a merge request from an impatient developer. I had no time or energy to maintain the script. I decided to switch the interaction with the repository from merge requests to forks. And now I'm at a spot where I am collaborating with contributors and doing the job that I want. I am writing Python, which is why I started doing this in the first place. I didn't intend to become a product owner or the world's slowest DevOps engineer, but perhaps I have. That's where this story ends for today. Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can see some of your questions. Oh, there's clapping. All right, great. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth. That was a really wonderful session. I'll just pull on the questions onto the screen and we could get started. I can see quite a few questions. Yeah, best for you to take a couple of sips of water first.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Yeah, so here's the first question. Before the process of crafting project, before turning into critical infrastructure, how well have you planned and executed crafting project? And what's the impact and professional challenges that you overcame?
How well have I planned and executed crafting projects? I would say that part of my company's bargain with our research and development department around crafting days is that you should have something to show for it. You should be able to demo the product that you've built or give a presentation about the thing that you spent your time on during your crafting days. there's been, I would say, a mixed enforcement of that expectation, especially as the department has grown from when I started, it was we could all fit in a room together, a big conference room maybe, but now we're distributed across different continents, and there are many more people working in the department, and so there hasn't been a strong culture of being able to share to such a large group remotely. I'm trying to think of, yeah, the impact of professional challenges I've overcome. I can't think of a professional challenge that a crafting day thing has helped me overcome. Feel free to ask another follow-up question if you can think of a better way to ask about that. I would say one of the impacts, though, that presenting this crafting project and sharing the repository has had is that now when I meet different people around the organization, they know me from that. It'll be, oh, I saw you talking about this in the Slack channel, or I have access to your repo, or I saw you present about, that before 2020, I saw you present about that on stage during the all hands. So if anything, it's probably helped rather than been something I've had to overcome.
Great inputs, of course. Next up, we have a question from Giant. Can you shed more lights on how you manage deadlines for smaller parts or modules of your project in your overall journey?
Oh boy, yeah, I didn't is the short answer. It was just something I was working on in the time that I had, and occasionally, yes, I would get interrupted and pulled onto a thing that was really, really broken. But for the most part, it was additional features that weren't, I would say with the main exception being the one in the middle of my story, there weren't, I was intentionally keeping the project management side of it out of our Jira project and out of my developers' view so that I didn't have deadlines and things that kind of pressure. I think that is what kept me going on it for so long, and why I've been working on it since 2019 is because I've been able to work on it at a sustainable pace, and there haven't been a lot of expectations about what it should be, or what should be part of it or not, or when something in particular should work. It's possible that will become part of my job in the future a little bit more. We'll see about that.
Sorry, I was in mute. All right, we have another question from Jalpa. So the question is, what role did writing tests play in reshaping and refactoring the code base? So there are two parts to it. Yeah. And how did testing contribute to your renewed enthusiasm for maintaining the project?
It really did contribute. Writing tests made it so that I could refactor and change things and know that they still worked. Do not refactor and change your code base without first writing tests. Oh my goodness. Unless you want to do really a lot of manual testing, which when you're running, a Python script that like calls a bunch of APIs is not the most exciting way to test a thing. It's very achievable to have API tests that are effective and quick and do exactly what you need them to. I think I wouldn't have gotten as far and kept working on it if writing the tests hadn't been part of it. Figuring out how to write the tests, I should probably include that as part of the story, also made me change some of the way that the script was broken down. I had to make some of the functions and methods a little bit smaller so that I could call the exact pieces that I needed to for a few different cases.
Awesome. And I'll just pull a question that is just here. Let me just put it out. Just give me a second. So there's a question from Prathmesh. Will this project help in reducing cost?
Yes. I haven't tried to quantify the cost, but that would be a really good thing to do the next time I want to raise. But right, just the half hour of time that it was saving me every day was enormous. If people were running it themselves on their machines, it would save them a similar amount of time. And then, yeah, if you sort of extrapolate that into everybody's pipelines, certainly tens of hours a week of manpower, person power. That's what I would guess. Yeah.
Great. There's one more question. Let me just pull this up. Just give me a second. Yeah. So this is from Abhinash, and he wants to know how can one prepare for the future in the face of advancing technology? That definitely seems to be a popular question these days.
Wow. How can one prepare for the future? Oh man, the way you phrase this, I feel like advancing technology is going to crush you unless you prepare. Whew. Not sure I have a good answer to this. The thing, I guess part of the reason that I wanted to practice writing Python and practice making sure that other people could read what I wrote and that it was organized in a good way is because I felt like that was a good future-proof tool, regardless of whether Python was necessarily the language that I would be writing in future roles around my company or in future positions at other companies. Yeah, just making sure that you have skills that you want to keep using. Ideally, they're also marketable skills that people hire for and that will search for buzzwords on your resume, not get filtered out from HR software. But yeah, I'm curious if you have a good answer to this.
Great. We'll pull a question up. This is from Vaishali, and she wants to know what was your strategy to manage backlog, if you had any, for the task you had planned to incorporate in the project.
Yeah, I guess this is sort of related to the earlier question. The way that I was managing the backlog for myself for this project was with GitLab issues. There's a way that GitLab, and I assume other hosting services as well, would then connect the merge request, right? If I had sort of labeled it and had the right number, that it would connect the issue to the merge request so people would get an email when the issue that they had submitted was completed and something that I had finished off for them. That was my initial system. The list that I showed that I was working through in the summer of 2022, I had on a Trello card. That was a checklist because those were things that people hadn't submitted. That was all. I was using Trello as my own personal organization system because I wasn't on a team at the time, but I felt like I needed to keep track of my work and specifically to keep my work in progress really low. It's really easy to, to find lots of problems around the organization and want to solve them all at the same time. But if you pick up fewer of them at a time, then you'll make more progress on them. And so, yeah, especially this script when I would, because I would be picking it up and working on it in between other things that were more urgent or that a team would ask me to do. I needed some way to keep track of where I was and what I had done last and how far I had gotten. So yeah, even just a checklist was enough for that. Don't overthink it.
Awesome. I'm unable to see. There was this question that we had on the stage. Just give me a second. Um, so, how has the transformation of your project impacted your view of software development and your role within the organization?
Hmm. Oh, I had taken that slide out. I had a slide in an earlier version of this presentation that pointed out that small things can grow into much bigger things. It's hard to predict exactly how things will grow and how much they will become a product. So that's one thing I'm more aware of now from personal experience. How has it impacted my role within the organization? Yeah, I think that being a person who my code touches so many people's pipelines has put me in a better position to argue for the role that I have now, which actually, instead of the role that I had for a couple of years where I was thinking about testing and quality across the 7 teams in my department, I'm now doing the same thing, but for the 60 or so teams across our whole R&D organization, the hundreds of people in our whole company. I wouldn't say that this exclusively is the thing that got me to that. There were lots of other factors there, but I think it was one example of something where it served a purpose that touched a lot of teams in different parts of the organization.
Great. Thank you so much. We have just touched upon 45. We have crossed a minute, but I do want to bring this question up on the stage if it's okay with you.
Sure.
It's a question from Jan, who wants to know, do you regret starting the project or not?
Oh man, yeah, this is a great question. So yeah, I'm wondering what he thinks, and if I should have started this project. Where did I go wrong? Should I have not shared it with anyone? Should I have not told my developers that I did this? Should I have not accepted that merge request? Should I have not done the forking and really merged everybody's code in so that it served all purposes? Should I have not written any of the tests by myself? Should I have paired with people on that too and not gone off in a corner and returned to it being my side project? Yeah, I mean, there's so many different things that I could have done here. And I am not sure what's the right thing. I think ultimately I have really liked writing Python. It's been a little bit more fun to ask the kind of product owner and questions that I get now and some of the debugging of pipelines stuff. I couldn't have predicted that initially. And that has been a good skill to build and an interesting part of my job. Yeah, I hesitate to say I regret it, but I don't fully not regret it. I think that's where I am right now. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. That was, very engaging and an insightful session. I'm pretty sure our audience must have really loved it. I can see a lot of questions, of course, and a lot of chats. So I do think that, they did had a really good time. So thank you all to the attendees for being such an engaging audience. We would be uploading all our recorded sessions on YouTube. So you can go back and listen to it again and do share it with your peers. By the way, if you enjoyed this session, please feel free to share snippets from Elizabeth's session on social media with the hashtag TestMuConf. And Elizabeth is also there on LinkedIn, so feel free to tag her. And if you have more questions, please post it on Lambda Test community and share snippets from the conference, as I said, right, with the hashtag. So yeah, have a good day. Thank you so much. And Elizabeth, thank you again for a wonderful session.
Thanks
Bye.
so much for having me.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.